and we told our story. And while we were telling this story, we were using the vocabulary, which we knew that they would get some of, but we were hoping that when they would come out on the other end and they were back on their campuses and working with their teams, that they would say, oh, I heard about that somewhere. I can make a connection now. And we modeled. Somewhere I read about the fact that the more words a child hears, the faster they will learn the language. And so our job was to give as many opportunities to our staff to hear the words so that they could begin to learn the language, and for us to model so that there was a connection with those words, with the concepts of what we were doing. And our new teachers got that within the 4.5 days that they were here before everyone else came. The other thing we did with them is when they were hired, we sent them a book. We welcomed them to the district and said, here's a book we want you to read. And the book was called Heroes. And it's a very easy way to read about continuous improvement when you're not even sure that you're reading about continuous improvement and systems and how systems work and how you look at the processes to improve the systems. And it's a fun read, but more than that, it's a message. We're sending you a book. This book is yours. We want you to read it before you report to work. That's a big message to give out, and I think it has stood us well in then what happened next with our new staff.
I use the analogy of something that it's a highly scientific theory I came up with called the St. Augustine approach to improvement, to change. And in Texas, if you have a lot of money, you can sod your lawn by just covering it, with pieces of grass. But if you have a large area, you just simply can't afford to do that. So you take little things they call plugs, and you put them in the ground, you fertilize things well, you water them, and then they send out runners of grass that in fact connect with other runners, and after a certain amount of time you have a beautiful lawn. It's seeded it. That's one approach we've used, in that we've worked with both individuals. How can we create those plugs of change? How can we give them the most learning, the most opportunity to interact and feedback as possible, and allow them to, in fact, to go and send out those runners of innovation and those runners of change, so they'll begin to create those webs of improvement. I think that approach alone was probably all we needed when we first started. As we grew larger, and with the rapidity, just how quickly things were changing, we had to be more systematic also. We had to look to say, where are we beginning to reach a critical mass? Where are we now saying there are enough people that in fact support this, that we can say this is a requirement, this is an expectation of the district, and see how we could work that way. So I think it was working both with individuals and at the same time working with systems, and beginning to work at some common processes that everyone could support and agree with. When we first began to study with David, and I was fortunate enough to learn to attend a session with Deming and with Myron Tribus, and they would say that it would be at least 3 to 5 years before you could see any kind of transformation. And being a little arrogant, perhaps, I thought, you certainly will see that happen much more quickly than that. Well, now that it's 20 years later. I realize we're never going to get to it, that there is never an end point, And that's exciting. That's exciting that there's always going to be new things that we can do, but knowing we have the tools to get there. But it makes it all the work worthwhile, because you know you're working on the right things. You're working on things that are worth working on. They're things that are important. They're not just how do you get students to be more compliant and to, in fact, take less ownership, to rob them of that, but how can you get them to be more and more capable? And that's pretty exciting.
We had several instances where we would have students who would leave our district and go somewhere else, and we would get phone calls of, what do you all do there? This child's wanting to know where his diagnostic testing is. How is he supposed to know what he's supposed to learn if he doesn't have this test to take to diagnose where he is in the expectations of the learning? Well, that makes you feel pretty good, especially on those times when you think, are we getting anywhere yet? Because it is, I said, a long journey, and you don't get there. But over time, you see a group of people and students who just live this way. But it does not happen overnight.
I think there are two things that helped us have the momentum and now have become a part of the culture. And one is to realize that we needed to stop looking to blame people and look at how we can really focus on systems. And we talk a great deal about this in our Voluntary Continuous Improvement Institute, in our administrators retreat. It's something that I think we continue to talk about. That we're not looking to blame individuals. If the problem appears to be with me, it's just that I'm close to the problem. It doesn't mean that I caused it. What is to look at the process. If you're not happy with the results, look at the process that led to that result. And so getting away from that focus on there's got to be somebody to blame. It's got to be somebody that's a result instead of let's look at the system. Let's look at the processes. And along with that, when you look and you realize, it's the system that needs to be worked on, I think that we began to celebrate ways in which we could find things that needed to be improved. And it's very freeing when you can take that fear, again, drive out that fear and build the trust in the system that we're looking for ways that we can improve. We're celebrating that idea of failing forward, of, okay, that didn't work so well, but what can we do now? I can remember vividly, I call it an experience of the Halstead kind, a woman that works with me, Jan Halstead, and she was planning on developing a fairly elaborate system of delivering summer assistance to students in the area, students who did not have as rich environment in terms of books and other resources during the summer. And so they would tend to lose ground over the summer. So she developed this system, and again, this was early, where we'd ask each other to say, ask me, how do you know? So we sat down and had a conversation. So, well, how do we know? How do we know that this is the right problem to work on, instead of just pulling this out of the air, saying this is a pretty one to chase. This will be lots of fun, and we'll have these buses. We'll strip them out, and we'll put books and all kinds of resources. And it was a great idea. So she went away and she looked at the demographics of where she was planning to go, what was happening, and we found that in fact, we were addressing the wrong problem, that we could have implemented the plan and seen no impact because of the demographics of the students, in fact, who were being served. But I think the most important story is not the specifics of it, but I can remember her running into my office with a piece of paper with this huge grin on her face saying, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong. And I think that's was a huge shift in culture, celebrating that being wrong is a great thing to celebrate, knowing that that in fact we need to go in a different direction is very valuable, and I think that's something the culture now embraces.
I've summarized in a very quick period of time what went on over, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. And it was very up and down. It was not an easy process. I wish that I could sit and tell someone, do this, do this, do this, do this, in a nice little neat format about how to try and change an organization from one that acts mostly on special calls to one that really is analyzing the system and trying to change the system. But it's not that simple. It's you have politics, you have people, you have emotions, of course you have children in the whole mix. And what I felt like at the time is we would take 2 or 3 steps forward and take 1 or 2 steps back. And I guess the advice I would have for people is that you kind of have to get rooted in the philosophy and then be patient and persistent and keep pushing and pushing and look for those areas where you can make gains and not be willing to go jump off a building when you don't succeed and have to take a couple of steps back. We kept pressing, we kept highlighting those people who we thought were exemplifying what we wanted. And over a period of a couple of years, it I guess just kind of clicked, and people actually didn't question it anymore. And this came with a lot of work in terms of continuing to educate people over and over and over and over again. And we continued to learn new things by bringing people like Myron Tribus and Brian Cole and lots of other people. I mean, Monta and I and several others actually got the opportunity early on to go to a Deming conference and listen to Dr. Deming. So it really was persistence and in continuing to push it and not wavering on the fact that this is the direction that we want to go.
One of the things that's so important about this story and the Leander Way of implementing quality learning throughout their district is that they're about the only example I know of worldwide of continually applying these concepts in a very purposeful way over a very long period of time. We don't normally see that. We often see people treat just about any improvement effort as a fad, and so they begin something and 2 or 3 years later then they're off to something else, and after they do that 2 or 3 times then they wonder why teachers and administrators no longer get excited about new concepts or no longer want to get on board because they're afraid it's just all going to go away tomorrow. But in Leander you don't see that. You see a continued effort of focusing on learning as the key, and students and everything else revolves around that. And it's that constancy of purpose that Dr. Deming talked about that's formed the key to, I believe, their success over a long period of time.
Not only have we had improvements, incredible improvements in achievement And I think that certainly you can't underestimate that. That's very important. It's a fact of life, as Deming would say, but it's not enough. I mean, it's certainly we need to prepare students to do well on high stakes testing, and which is becoming more and more prevalent. But that's only a baseline in terms of what we owe students, and we owe them preserving that joy in learning that they enter a system with. We owe them the ability to follow their dreams. We owe them the ability to function well after school, that in fact we're giving them tools so they don't need us anymore, that they're very independent learners. And that's certainly much more difficult than scoring well on a standardized achievement test.
The visual I ask people to do is to think about their own kids or their nieces or nephews, or even whenever they were a little kid. It was that first day of kindergarten, and that first day of first grade, that first day of school, whatever school was for you. And you've got that little backpack on, and that excitement that's just palpable. Just that kid just exudes excitement for that first day of school. That's what we're after. You capture that moment, okay, and then flash forward after they've been in our system for 12, 13 years, and the last day of school. And what kind of excitement for learning do those kids have in that time frame? From that moment when they were so excited to the time when they're exiting our system. My vision for Leander ISD is that students exit our system with the same passion for and joy in learning they had when they entered our system, without economics determining their success. If we could bottle that excitement that the kids have when they start school, and if it just imagine, instead of, frankly, what happens now, I mean, in our system, in systems across the way, that declines, it dissipates, it goes away till the end. They're like, oh, can't wait to get out, right? What if we built it? What if we, at minimum, sustained it? But what if we increased it? What if they realized that the further they got in our system, the more they got to learn about the things that they wanted to learn, and they had more ownership in learning? And so I delineated it a little bit further, and I said, so what does that look like? It looks like that we need to personalize instruction to the greatest extent possible. Differentiated instruction, student ownership of learning. What does that look like? It looks like that we need to use technology in a whole different way. That technology, we still have this notion of technology being this silo that sits aside and is just something we occasionally plug into, when in fact, technology is the pencil of our times. Technology just is. When a pencil breaks, people don't call the pencil department to say, how do I fix this pencil? You go and sharpen the pencil. You know how to do that. Same thing with technology. Technology is just a tool for us to do those things, to accelerate some of those things that already exist. And when we recognize that our focus is on student learning, that our goal is to at least maintain, if not increase, that joy for learning kids have when they enter our system. And when we recognize that we need to, it's our job then to personalize and differentiate that and have students own that learning, that's what's going to set the course for the future of Leander ISD.
I think that Leander is knocking on the door of understanding what it means to transform that relationship between teachers and students, and students and students. And it's been a long journey, but to truly realize what it would mean to have students owning their learning, if I could look into the future and think that 10 years from now, we had students in every classroom at every level who you could sit down and interview, and they would know exactly what it is they need to know, as well as what they want to know, their personal passions, as well as what they need to know just for the given expectations of state curriculum, and that they could set goals, they could monitor their own progress, that they felt very comfortable in looking to other people for those resources. The teacher certainly being important resources, but they had that ability to truly own their learning, and they were doing it with a great deal of enthusiasm and excitement for the learning process. I mean, learning's exciting. Learning's exciting, and somehow we take that away by schooling. It seems a little absurd, but we do.
I think whenever you take all of those things, whenever you take our focus on students in the classroom, and really looking at what are they doing in the classroom, how are they talking to each other, what is the work that they're creating, and you take this vision that we want to build student ownership in learning, we want to build student joy for learning, and you combine those two things. That combination is what's going to propel this school district to transform public education.
It would be easy for us to become satisfied with what we're doing. We have gotten to a place where we have lots of systems and processes in place that support high levels of student achievement, but we have so far to go in terms of really seeing a system that empowers students to own their learning, so that when they leave our system, that we know they're entirely capable of figuring out where they want to go, what their dreams are, and having fully equipped to be able to realize them.
What I want to do is transform public education. I want to transform the vision that public education has in people's heads. That unfortunately, public education has developed this vision in people's heads that's just ugly, and we've brought it on ourselves. There's a systems problem with it. So what I challenge principals when we meet with them about twice a month, I'm constantly saying to principals, guys, all I'm about is transforming public ed. That's all. That's all we're about in Leander ISD. So how are we going to do that? I truly believe it's this combination of these two things is what's going to propel us in the future to transform public education.